The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge, I'm not obsessed, I'm possessed. Ryan Luis Rodriguez presiding. Your eyes for the Honorable Judge Rodriguez.
That was touch and go there for a while. Be seated. Welcome to the Reels of Justice.
That's a normal accent?
You got there. Almost. You almost cleared it. Today we are hearing the case of The People versus In Dreams, a 1999 psychological thriller about a woman with a psychic connection to the serial killer who murdered her 10-year-old daughter. Sounds like a real barrel full of laughs. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always, in this courtroom, films are to be considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt that this film is guilty. Mr. Dylan J. Schlender, you're representing the prosecution. You may present your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. In Dreams is a movie that should only exist in our nightmares. Ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at a top-to-bottom travesty of 90s filmmaking from a surprisingly competent director and otherwise talented cast. One pillar of this case has to be Annette Bening's acting. This 4-time Oscar-nominated actress falls so flat and is so unconvincing in her portrayals of grief, anger, sadness, madness, badness, that the viewer not only gets detached from the movie, but we do not really care about our protagonist. The story here is remarkably boilerplate in that it takes no real chances and explores no real themes. There is very little menace in what is supposed to be a thriller, and there is not a lot of surrealist action to justify the weight given to people's dreams in the feature. It simply does not measure up to a paranormal standard or a thriller standard that we had at that time in the 90s. To wit, Robert Downey Jr.'s Vivian is no Hopkins Hannibal. There is, of course, just the technical aspects of the movie, too. $30 million and none of it seemingly on the screen as we move from one dingy location to another, never with a sense of dread or foreboding, but with a sense of boredom and hand-waving, saying, can we please get on with it? So let us now get on with this and have In Dreams committed to a dingy room in a dingy asylum where it will never be seen from or heard from again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schlender. Appearing on behalf of the defense is Mr. Billy Ray Brewton. Please present your opening statement.
Thank you, my homeboy judge. So the prosecuting attorney made a lot of comments, used the word dingy, I think, 47 different times. The only thing dingy is the ineptitude behind that argument.
Oh my!
A candy-colored clown they call the Sandman tiptoes to my room every night. No, we are not here to discuss the popular Roy Orbison song from 1963, but rather the equally haunting 1999 film of the same name, directed by the powerhouse of the fantastique, Mr. Neil Jordan, written by Jordan and filmmaker Bruce Robinson, best known for his film With Nail and I, and based on the novel Doll's Eyes by the great Barry Wood, who also wrote Twins, which was turned into the film Dead Ringers.
I thought it was Twins.
Derided upon its release and a large box office disappointment for a then young DreamWorks Pictures, In Dreams has all but disappeared into the thick miasma of forgotten genre films. But there is far more to this haunted fairy tale than meets the eye, and In Dreams deserves to take its place alongside other dark and twisted dreamscapes a la Legend, The Cell, and The Fall. There have been many films released that all have dealt with psychics and premonitions and dreams becoming reality. None have managed to capture the balance between what is real and what is not in the way In Dreams has. Jordan infuses every frame of the film with either a gauzy sheen to denote a dream or the dark and fragmented horrors that denote a nightmare. This film glides effortlessly between those two realms, forcing the audience to decide for themselves what is real and what is fantasy. And just as Claire, our protagonist, searches for truth, so do we as the audience alongside her. In Dreams can even be placed into a more contemporary reading as a film about the innate ability of men to believe women. In Dreams, since I first saw it in 1999 in the theaters, has been a film that I have championed to everyone who had listened. I have proudly turned on several folks to this film who also found the same sort of fairy tale glee that I found in this film that could never be made in 2023. This is a film entirely of its time. I'll go more into detail about the performances and the settings and the directorial choices as we move on, but I will close with one simple line. The prosecution is full of shit, yo.
I was going to quote something.
Hey, I've got to be full of something.
Thank you, Mr. Brewton. You may step down from the pulpit. Mr. Schlender, you may proceed with your first exhibit.
Thank you, Your Honor. I really
Objection!
Oh.
Sorry, got carried away there. Go ahead.
I'm used to it. I still think I'm the only lawyer who's been objected to during his opening statements. Like people object to me.
I was too for Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, okay, yeah. So let me proceed with my first exhibit, Your Honor, because I really need to drive this home. Annette Bening's acting in this is really, really bad. And frankly, that alone is enough to sink this movie. Now, this could be a case of Bening just playing to the script. So even if we assume it is not her fault, then the material is still bad. Her frustrated housewife routine is redolent of Alice or Punchline, but completely devoid of the charm that we see in those previous movies. Bening we see her reeling out of control, but her inability to express these emotions leave the audience scratching our heads. Now, I know our favorite thing to do in the theater is lean over to our fellow moviegoers and say, people do grieve differently. But this immediately clashes with the manic or would-be manic performance when she's institutionalized. I want you all to remember that scene where she's screaming and struggling against the orderlies as they're putting her in that padded cell. Oh my God, at least it made you look up from your phones. You have to give her that much. So I am really hammering home on her performance because it is ultimately what this movie is built around. And her inability to be convincing or sympathetic just keeps the viewers completely detached. Imagine if the director focused on that sweet underwater town instead of Bening melting down over apples.
Mr. Brewton, please defend Annette Bening's performance.
I mean, do we live in a world where someone like Annette Bening needs to be defended? I think not.
100%. That's the show.
Oh, yes.
Maybe not before this movie.
Annette Bening, as I'm glad that you mentioned all of her accolades earlier about the number of Oscars she's been nominated for.
Not nominated for this.
No, not nominated for this. But I would say that your idea of Annette Bening being something that is hanging this film down is entirely inaccurate. So Annette Bening understood the assignment. Annette Bening read this script. I would assume had conversations with the filmmaker, Neil Jordan. She showed up to work, and she showed up understanding it. Now, if you watch this film from top to bottom, you will notice a delicious little camp streak that runs through this film. And that campiness is not just in the performances, and I don't just single out Annette Bening on this. Robert Downey Jr. also understood the assignment, and we'll get into him later. Annette Bening is going full Joan Crawford here. I'm not going to argue that point, but the idea that she is not accurately portraying the emotions that her character would be feeling. Here is a woman who lives a a pretty good existence. She has a beautiful family. She has a gorgeous child. She is successful in her line of work. She just happens to be having these visions that are complicating her life in a myriad of ways. See something like The Dead Zone for an example of how visions and premonitions can completely shudder and ruin someone's life. And then her daughter is murdered. Now, I have never had a child taken away from me. I can't put myself in the shoes of someone who has to say that the way they act in that sort of moment, is right, is wrong. I don't know. All I can say is that I bought it. I bought that hysteria. I bought those wild emotional springs from that character, because at no point are they trying to convince us that Claire doesn't have problems. Clearly, Claire has problems. And some of those are probably mental health issues. Some of those are her sort of premonition and psychic related abilities. And if you go to especially an insane asylum as the one depicted in this one, which is about as bad as an insane asylum can be,
One would say dingy.
I can't imagine how that is going to play on your already wrecked emotional state. When you know something that you know for 100% is a fact, that you know is the truth and is a fact, and you can't get anyone to believe you. Not your husband, not your doctor, not the cops. Nobody will believe something that you alone know is right and is true. Yes, I imagine that is mentally and psychologically exhausting and damaging and could send anybody through the ringer. I think Annette Bening is very warm when she needs to be here. I think she is very cut off and cold when she needs to be. I think she plays hysterical very believably. There are a lot of through lines between this film and Candyman, and Annette Bening is certainly taking a different performance approach than someone like Virginia Madsen, but they are very different actresses. They're going for very different things. Virginia Madsen's character is not having to deal with the types of things. I compare these together because you're going to hear me compare this to Candyman a lot throughout, because I do think Bernard Rose and Neil Jordan share a lot of DNA as filmmakers. But I don't think there's any reason to need to defend Annette Bening here, though I've just done that. She's Annette fucking Bening. She played this role the way she thought she needed to play this role. She showed up for the assignment at hand, and I think she knocked it out of the park. I dropped my mic, but you couldn't hear it because I've got a bunch of peanut shells on my phone.
Candyman, from the director of Immortal Beloved. Please proceed, Mr. Schlender.
See, I don't think this is a mic drop like you think it is, because Annette Bening.
He didn't mean to drop the mic, wait, or did he?
I never said it was I never said it was intentional.
Yeah. So
right.
So Annette Bening, in this, she is supposed to be reeling and devastated that her whole life is falling apart.
Objection at the use of the word supposed.
What? I mean, that's what she is. You don't think that's what's happening here? You just said the frustration and anger at no one believing her. So either she's out of control or she's in control.
I said the use of the word supposed. I don't think she's supposed to be. She is those things.
No, she. Yes, but we're talking about how she's conveying that on the screen. That's my point. And she's not doing it convincingly. And I think a lot of that has to do with how the dialogue's written and her performance. When we see her freaking out over the apples, throwing them in the sink and everything. It's like, if you look at her, there's just no emotion or fear or anguish in her face at all. She is literally just throwing apples. It is just a lot of bizarre acting choices that she made that don't resonate with those scenes. So when she is acting manic, you're laughing at her. And when she's cold and detached and drives the car off of the dam, you're just like, what the heck is going on? There's nothing to kind of clue you in, and so you stop caring about her. But I would like to move on to my next point, Your Honor.
Please do. All
right. So now that we established that Bening is not capable or was poorly directed, and that she can't carry this story, what exactly are we looking at here? Well, it's kind of a paranormal thriller, I think we would say. But the paranormal stuff is not particularly spooky or interesting, and there's frankly not that much that's thrilling. Benning's dreams tap into the future and into the head of the serial killer who is running amok town. It's never really satisfactorily explained why Bening has these dreams or why she can even share them. The killer doesn't know either, but we seemingly can trace it back to his childhood abuse. And look, I'm not saying movies have to explain everything. But keep in mind, this is a movie where nothing interesting is happening at all. So maybe an exploration of the powers in the psychic history is warranted. And we don't have to delve too deep into the plot holes, though you did bring some up yourself, Billy, when you talked about the cops, right? So the cops don't believe her with the first vision at the beginning of the movie. And then when everything starts shaking down, the detective actually does go up to her and say, oh, no, I should have believed you. This is our fault and everything. And she's like, oh, no. But then she ends up getting institutionalized anyway, is still screaming about all these things. Where's that cop? Where's the doctor? The doctor actually checks out the record. So people actually are believing her. She's just very impatient and escapes from the mental asylum anyway. If she just sat there, they would have eventually figured out that her dreams were true. But what we're really looking at, too, is the other side of this coin. We spent a lot of time talking about the deficiencies of Annette Bening. Let's talk about the deficiencies of Robert Downey Jr. And the biggest thing is he's just not an intimidating presence. We very easily believe Annette Bening could best him in singles combat the way he does. So when we pull all of this together, the thriller aspect that Robert Downey Jr. is supposed to be bringing in and the paranormal aspect that Annette Bening's character is supposed to be bringing in, it's like anti-synergy. Both things combine and are lesser for it, and it is very unsatisfactory.
Mr.
Horse manure.
I should have just waited. I knew something was going to be popping up like that.
Just to throw back on the Annette thing, so you mentioned that we have established all these things. All that we have established is that someone doesn't understand how an actor makes their choices or the acting process. Nothing.
Yes, I don't think anyone can understand her choices. They're so poor.
No, they're not poor at all. Nothing interesting is happening. I think that one thing you can't fault for this film for, lots of interesting things are happening. You may not think that they necessarily, fall into your lane of interest, or you may think that they're not explained well enough for your taste, and that's fine. But there are interesting things afoot in this film. And the way the film ends, yes, it ends with a bit of ambiguity in terms of the psychic relationship. I'm glad you said it. I am too. I don't always want things force-fed to me. That didn't affect my enjoyment of the film at all. Annette Bening in this, you're talking about the plot points with like Annette Bening and the cops and the holes and like, why should she sit there and trust them? No one has believed her until this point. Her daughter is murdered.
Except when the cop explicitly says, I should have believed you before she's institutionalized.
What does that matter? She's still got institutionalized. So she's supposed to just sit there and wait and trust people?
I'm not saying she's supposed to sit there and wait. Her escaping does make sense. That's fine. But I'm just saying, it's where are these people during?
Exactly. Well, it's fine then. So then it's not an issue. So then I'll move on. So thank you for proving my point. So you're talking about not intimidating. I find that to be nonsensical. I think Robert Downey Jr. actually is quite intimidating in this film. I think he is taking a different approach with this character. He's certainly not going the Hannibal Lecter route, which I think is fine. He's going his own route, and I think it works really, really well. We already know going into this that this man is a murderer of multiple children. We go into this knowing he has the capacity for great evil and great horror. And, you know what? It's not Tony Todd in Candyman. It's Robert Downey Jr. And, I think about something like Con Air and how Steve Buscemi was effectively used in that film. Not somebody that is necessarily intimidating at all. But what makes him intimidating is knowing the things that he's done. And then when you know these things that you've done and you see it in this tiny compact package, it makes sense. And I think it makes sense here with Robert Downey Jr. as well. I also think the best scenes in the film are the scenes between Robert Downey Jr. and Annette Bening. I think they're really effective. I think the imagery of the apples are really striking. I think the underwater town is actually a wonderful conceit. I will agree. I wish they had explored the underwater town more. That said, I like what we get. And, I feel like I'm just going to go on another rant about Annette Bening being awesome, but I'm not going to do that because I know we've got plenty more exhibits to cover because I've got at least 43.
Oh, no.
Oh, Christ.
So I think
Dylan, you might as well go ahead.
You're all related to Annette Bening. No.
I hope, and Con Air. I hope we get some more Con Air.
More Con Air would be nice. I mean, so in Con Air, the Steve Buscemi thing was played. That was played for Actually, no, I think it's really illustrative of of the point here is that the Steve Buscemi thing was played for laughs.
It
The
doesn't
idea
matter.
that
He's still supposed to be intimidating.
Billy, let me finish though. And the reason everyone was intimidated by him is because it's funny that it's Steve Buscemi. That's the whole conceit in Con Air. This is not a comedy. This is a thriller. This is a paranormal thriller. And we don't see Robert Downey Jr. engage in these evil acts. We just hear about it, right? We're told, nothing shown. So when he's finally revealed, there's nothing about him that's intimidating or scary. We just know that he has a thing for killing kids because that's what we've been told. We're not giving any emotional scenes of him engaging in violence in a substantive way that convey that kind of intimidation. And if they were playing it for laughs, like in Con Air, you have a great point. But I don't think that is what they were going for. But I could go on to my next point.
I never stated anything about the comedy versus drama because I don't think it matters.
I think it matters a lot. That is why Steve Buscemi is intimidating in Con Air.
I mean, I guess if you're an actor that doesn't treat every role as it's a character and you treat it as just, oh, this is my comedy role, this is my drama role, then I guess you would be right. But unfortunately, I think we've known for many, many years now, that's not how actors approach their craft. And so I would say
this movie suffered.
I would say that Steve Buscemi, that role isn't intimidating. It doesn't work because it's Steve Buscemi. I think you could have put another actor that is considered slight or something like that, and it would have worked just as well. And yes, he is intimidating, partially because we know all of the things that he's been accused of doing. And I think that's okay. And like we don't see the Robert Downey Jr. character committing these crimes. We don't see the Steve Buscemi character committing any of these crimes either. And he is still just as intimidating. I think that has everything to do with what we know about this character and not necessarily just because it's Steve Buscemi.
Okay, enough about Con Air, gentlemen.
I was going to say, there you go, Maynard. We actually did talk about Con Air a lot. All right, so I am sure this is going to be my final point here, Your Honor. I'm sure there is a reason co-writer Bruce Robinson said of In Dreams, and I'm doing my best Bruce Robinson impression. It was a complete and utter mess from top to bottom. Christ almighty, this hit the floor and dug. And while his shoddy writing played a role, we can't deny what we see on the screen is wholly unpleasant. The drabbiness, I dare say dinginess, of the shooting could feasibly be argued to set the mood, but it is so one note we have no place to go. So this should be sharply juxtaposed by the red of the blood and the apples, but the lack of skill in framing and filming these elements just adds to the drabness. Instead of having these reds, it's all part of the same muddy palette. Now, keep in mind, this movie had a whole underwater town to play with. Wonderful flooding at the beginning. Possibly the best opening to a movie being best opening to a movie being bad ratio we've had until Snyder's The Watchmen. And this is to say nothing of the... What? Oh, yes. The beginning with the flooding, very well done. Rest of the movie, very bad. Beginning of The Watchmen with the times are changing, very good. Rest of the movie, And then just kind of...
You just lost me.
Just kind of a look like you like The Watchmen? We're talking about...
I like The Watchmen.
Oh, well, that's fine. But the beginning with
We're here to talk about
changing is the best. Hey,
keep
it's
digging
my
that
time,
grave.
Mr. Jerk.
Keep digging that grave.
So then just the one last final point, because it resonates in this courtroom for some reason, is the problematic portrayal of asylums and those who dwell in them. Just remember how this court weighed the trauma experienced by the kid and the wizard so heavily. I can't imagine how the jurors must feel about the interpretation of mental abuse and trauma leading to predation and murder as opposed to simple video game prowess. This was 1997, folks. Delayed till 1998 and then ultimately released in 1999. It was a mess from top to bottom, no matter what year they were going to come out, and I will rest there.
Mr. Brewton, I would love to hear any rebuttals that you have to that argument.
Oh my goodness. Well, there's just so many places to go there.
Just don't go to Con Air. That's all I ask.
No, I won't go there. I will say, I mean, that is such the go-to, which is like, well, the writer said this about it. The writer said this about it. Do we need to go through all of the instances of where a writer has said bad things about a movie that they wrote and that came out because it probably wasn't exactly what they wrote? I don't think so. I think we all know that that's a pretty common occurrence. So I think that holds very little water when discussing this film. I won't say too much about the depiction of asylums. I had an uncle who died in an asylum, so I will say they are not kind places. And I don't have a lot of love for them, like evidently our prosecutor does. I don't think that asylums have always been a bastion of ethical integrity. They may be now, but I don't know that they always have been. And I will agree. Like, I would love to see outdated sort of stereotypes like that brought into the modern day. But I'm looking around at the state of our mental health system today, and I don't know where that would come from. I don't say anybody beating down the door to say that our medical or mental health care system has gotten any better since what is depicted in the, I'll use my prosecutor's words, dingy asylum in Dreams.
It's pretty dingy.
But yes, so I think that this film is working on a very particular wavelength. It is not a bad wavelength. It is not the wavelength of a terrible film. I think it is a wavelength that you have to be on to enjoy it. And it doesn't mean you're wrong or that it doesn't mean that you've done something incorrect if you're not on its wavelength. It just means you're not on the wavelength. I mentioned some films earlier that I was comparing this to. Films like The Cell and The Fall. And these are films that are divisive. Not everybody loves them. I remember seeing a screening of The Fall in a packed theater, and 30 to 35% of the audience left before it was over. They were not into that film. So I get it. And I think this film falls right in line with that. I can still remember being in the theater in 1999 in probably a 20 to 30% filled house, because I used to see things. I would sneak. Okay, I'm going to just wrap myself out. I used to sneak out of school and go to matinees in Huntsville. Sorry, Mom and Dad, if you're listening to this.
Oh, we're sending this to them.
You too?
We're emailing it right to them.
Hey, that wasn't in Huntsville, but I was doing that too.
I just remember the very end of that film. And this is, and I've written about this before. The woman in the front of me, she didn't say anything positive or negative. She just went, "Whew, that was a lot." And I think she's right. It is a lot. I think visually the film is absolutely arresting. I think the cinematography by Darius Kanji is really impressive. I think the whole idea of it being dingy and drab throughout, I think is totally off base. I think it is creating this sort of twisted fairy tale, and I think it's doing it in these very interesting ways. And I think the way they choose to shoot the earlier scenes in the film, which are a little more hopeful and optimistic, versus the way they choose to shoot the later stuff, is very intentional, and I would say very effective. The music from Elliot Goldenthal, I think, is just tremendously good. This is a score that I listen to pretty regularly. I think it's actually a really, really well done score. And it's from Amblin Entertainment and DreamWorks Pictures. And I'm just going to say this too. To me, especially more towards the center end of the film, it feels like it's got some of that Amblin energy running through its veins as well. This is an interesting project because you take someone like Neil Jordan, you infuse him with that sort of Amblin energy, and then it's just interesting to see where he goes. And he's a divisive filmmaker. All of the stuff he makes doesn't land. This to me seems like very much sort of a passion project for Neil Jordan. I think Barry Wood, who wrote the book that this is based on, is tremendously good with creating horror concepts and horror conceits that can be translated in an entertaining and interesting way to the screen. And you can look at something like Dead Ringers, which was adapted from Twins, and this from Doll's Eye. I just think that this is a very underrated film, and I just rest on my laurels on this. I've recommended this to so many people to check out for the first time. I have yet to have one person tell me that it was not worth their time or not worth a watch, and a lot of people actually really enjoyed it, in large part because of Annette Bening's performance.
Oh, God, get better friends, Billy.
My friends are not the problem. Like most courts in this country, it's all in the prosecution.
Well, Mr. Schlender has rested his... Oh, you want to keep going? Never mind. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just gonna rebut a little bit.
Go ahead.
Do we have? Do you want to do an official say he's rested his thing, so then we can put it for Billy's? Billy, you can present your thing, and splice it in.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
that's
okay.
fine. We're not a
Alright.
real court.
this is very true.
Mr. Brewton, do you have any further exhibits?
I've been misled. I've been misled. This isn't a real court.
No, we're real lawyers, Billy, but it's not a real court.
Cut the recording.
Yes, I do have another exhibit. And so let's talk about 1999, right? 1999, widely considered to be one of the great years for film. You can name 30 films off the top of your head that are stone cold classics. That's obviously one of the reasons why I believe that this film sort of falls into the cracks when people talk about 1999. Plus, like you said earlier, I can't disagree with the fact it did not do well at the box office. This film, budget of $30 million, it only made $12 million. And the fact that it was shot in 1997 and released in 99 tells you that they didn't know what to do with it. This is not a film that you look and you go, wow, I know exactly how I'm going to promote this. I know exactly who I'm going to promote this to. Like, you have no clue. I remember the trailers for this film were very misleading because the trailers sort of built you up to believe that it was more of this Amblin-esque adventure. And then you go in and you sit down and this is a dark, sad, devastating, dingy, very twisted movie. Like there's no easy lane for this film to drive in. And that's where Neil Jordan has trucked for most of his career. He makes these types of films. He might occasionally have a film that really breaks through the mainstream, like Interview with the Vampire or something like that. But you can go back and watch Interview with the Vampire now too, and just see how subversive the moments in that film are, which are entirely Neil Jordan. This film is all subversive. This film is all Neil Jordan insanity wrapped up into a 100-minute package. I don't think audiences knew what to do with it then. I don't know that audiences know what to do with it now, but the ones that I know who have seen it are finding a place for it, not only in Neil Jordan's oeuvre, but also in the cinema of 1999, because it does have an interesting place as one of DreamWorks' earliest films. And, that's back when DreamWorks were taking these kinds of chances. And, again, the wavelength may not work for you, but to unilaterally say this is a bad movie, I think does disservice to Neil Jordan, Bruce Robinson, Barry Wood, Annette Bening, all the incredible people who worked on this film, who I think knew exactly what they were doing and exactly what they were trying to make.
Yes, Bruce Robinson actually did say, it was complete and utter mess from top to bottom. Christ almighty, this hit the floor and it dug. So, he did not like it, so you don't have to include him in your little speech that praising these people.
I would assume that he got paid for his work on this and cashed that check, so I'm sure he gets some enjoyment out of this film.
But that does not a good movie make, sir.
I didn't say it did. I think all the points I made before that are indicative of why this is a good movie.
One thing actually, because you brought up a while ago, I want to circle back to this point, is the end of the movie, right, where they're in the water, and it turns out they both live, which is maybe that's a little interesting. Like, oh, okay, then Robert Downey Jr. gets sentenced to the asylum, and he's like, I'm cool with this, very stoic. And then he starts having the dreams, and what we're supposed to assume is that Annette Bening is in his nightmares. She's taking over the dream power and control. But the only thing you have to ask is like, what, why, how? And he knows that these are just crazy dreams. And what's going to stop him from fighting back? It's a very unsatisfactory ending when you think about it, because you're like, okay, maybe she got a one-over on him, and now he's going to fight back harder next time. Everything in his past in this movie has led us to believe that he can handle himself and manipulate dreams very well, and nothing happened to disabuse us of that notion that it would change radically, or that it would become enhanced in Annette Bening.
Annette Bening just got better at it than he did. She has visions from almost the moment we see her in this film. And at the very end, she is now invading his dreams. She is now hunting him. Let's go back to the Candyland comparison, which is something that is also very similar at the end of Candyman. And I don't think it's fair to say that. I think it makes perfect sense. Claire has gained her sense of self and her power just by the fact of knowing incontrovertibly at this point, she was right. Everybody else was wrong. And now she has regained this power. She's regained this sense of self. And yes, now she is better in the dream world than Vivian is. And I think that is clearly presented. I don't think that certainly wasn't confusing to me.
No, but we have no reason to believe that Vivian's going to be less competent in the dream world. Like there's no
doesn't
reason for
suggest-
him to be scared.
It doesn't.
No, it
suggest that
does
he
because
is
he's
less
freaked
confident.
out. He's scared.
Well,
and
yes,
everything
because no one's done it to him before. I'd be freaked out too. I'd be freaked out too. But I mean,
they have been sharing those dream worlds. He knows it's something that can happen. That's just my point.
No, he doesn't. He knows that they can share a world. He doesn't know that someone can invade and take over his. That's a very different distinction. When you're
but he did it to Annette Bening. Remember when she bit the lip? So he knows it's a power that exists.
He knows that it's a power exists, but it's never happened. It's like Freddy Krueger. Like if Freddy Krueger was romping around in his dream world chasing after a teenager, and then and then all of a sudden, like in Jason X, there's Jason. Like, I mean, it throws you out of it. I'm sure that someone else now has this power that is equivalent to yours instead of being someone that you thought you were in control of. And that
I wish this movie was as good as Freddy versus Jason.
And this it's much better. And all this ties, and also this also ties back into the idea I mentioned earlier, which I think there is a contemporary reading of this film in terms of men not believing women and women regaining their power. And I think the ending of that plays into that also. Now, that's a contemporary reading. I'm not suggesting that is something that Neil Jordan had in his mind, because having seen a bunch of Neil Jordan's films, that doesn't seem like a through line that he would care very much about. No offense to Mr. Jordan, but it is a contemporary reading that you can
You're
make.
giving the Crying Game short shrift, Billy.
Well, that's because that's one of the most disgusting movies ever made. I never once said Neil Jordan knocked them all out of the park. But I think it all makes sense to me in the end about how it ends up the way it did. I'd be freaked out too if I was a Robert Downey Jr. character. Then all of a sudden, this person can control come in and completely control my dreams. Yeah, I'd be freaked out too. I might eventually learn how to deal with it. I might eventually learn how to conquer it. But at first, I'm going to be freaked the fuck out.
Any further exhibits, Mr. Brewton?
The only final exhibit I will say is this. Malarkey! The defense rests.
Okay, all sides have rested their cases. The attorneys will now present their closing arguments. Mr. Schlender, you may begin.
Thank you. My gentle jurors, we have to consider all the facts of this movie, everything that we saw on the screen. We need to look at Annette Bening's rudderless performance and Downey Jr.'s lack of menace. We need to look at a plot that evokes no emotional response, no sense of dread, no sense of wonder. We have to look at the drab, I dare say, dingy and muddy shots again and again. In Dreams just does not deliver on anything it intended. It is a failure of intentionality, even admitted by the co-writer, as I have quoted 2 times previously. So wake us up from this nightmare and vote guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brewton. Please present your closing argument.
In Dreams is a minor miracle. It came out in an interesting time for the film industry. It was made actually right before, the 1999 thrust into this new age of independent filmmaking. It came at the very early days of DreamWorks, a studio trying to figure out what it was going to do and how it was going to do it. At its best, it is reminiscent of De Palma's The Fury. At its worst, it is reminiscent of The Cell or The Fall or Legend, all films which I adore, all films which I think are pretty grand achievements. It is a pity, dare I say an outrage, that Annette Bening has received such blatant disregard on this podcast for her performing talents. I think she is fantastic in this film, walks a very thin line and walks it beautifully throughout. I think Neil Jordan is going wild with this film. I mean, this is Neil Jordan's breakaway from what I consider for a very long time. If you look at Crying Game, Interview with the Vampire, then he would go on to do Michael Collins and The Butcher Boy, which was kind of his 4-film run there leading up to In Dreams. I don't know. All of his films were feeling a little stuck in the mud to me. I think all of them were. I think Interview with the Vampire is the exception that you can make, but Interview with the Vampire, for all its faults and all of the good things about it, is a very, steadily made, sort of run of the mill, middle of the road entertainment, and it works. But there's nothing to show us those early splashes of Neil Jordan, like from The Company of Wolves or Mona Lisa, or even something just ridiculous like High Spirits. In Dreams is his chance to literally just go wild. I think he was probably given the kind of budget he had never been given before from a studio that was really backing him. And this is an auteur's film, for better or for worse. Neil Jordan, if nothing else, is an auteur. This is an auteur's film. It's like diving into Neil Jordan's mind for 100 minutes and seeing all the weird, beautiful, twisted things that reside therein. It's very similar to In the Company of Wolves in a lot of ways in that. And I think there are a lot of similarities between these two films in terms of the visual palette, in terms of the color palette, in terms of what we're getting there. I think it's one of his best films. I think it is one of Annette Bening's most underrated performances. As I mentioned earlier, I think the score is absolutely haunting. And I think during a time when we were seeing lots and lots of films about serial killers, post Silence of the Lambs and post Seven, we were seeing so many. And then this is such an unusual outlier. It is not one that fits easily into any definition or any particular genre. Like it is an out there fairy tale, fantastical whirlwind that sort of sweeps you up, and either you're swept up with it or you're not. But I think to call it to say this is a bad film, I think is a smack in the face to creativity and imagination and taking chances and taking risks. And I don't think that's something that we need to be doing in the year of our Lord 2023.
We do it so much.
Should be a tagline for the show, really.
I basically just argued against the existence of this show.
That's true. You're not the first.
Thank you both. Members of the jury, Mr. Big Ben Haslar, Mr. Maynard Bangs, and Mr. Bring the Apples Down on All of Us, Ryan Luis Rodriguez. You have all heard the facts concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict.
Right this way. The deliberation room's actually closed due to a leak, so you'll be sitting under that apple tree without the Andrews sisters. They don't like that. If you didn't know that.
Oh, Ben.
I got the Andrew Sisters joke. I enjoyed it.
Sure.
Not a lot of All in the Family.
Yeah, but my Fred Astaire vacuum cleaner
here.
joke was way over people's heads. Okay.
I mean, to be fair, this was literally just the
Bobby did not know what you were talking about, and Bobby knows everything, so go figure.
All right. The People versus Con Air. I'm kind of surprised they brought this to the courtroom.
Guilty,
I thought it was sorry, I got
guilty.
confused. No, I just have it so much in my notes. Yes, The People versus In Dreams. I found this case to be interesting. It's certainly a 50-50 film for me. There's a lot that I like. There's a lot that I don't like. I think what the prosecution hit more for me than anything else was the script. The other points that he made around the acting and some of those things didn't quite gel with me as much. But the script, I think, definitely could have used some fine-tuning up. Mr. Maynard, what did you think?
Well, just to follow up your point, so there were no moments in the movie where, like, especially when Annette Bening's like freaking out about the apples, or in the psych ward, that you weren't like, this is jarring.
But as the defender pointed out, like, you don't know, jarring is. I raised an eyebrow. I wouldn't go as far as jarring, but as he says, like, you don't know really how people grieve or how people would deal with this sort of insane stuff that's happening. Yeah. Or sorry, yeah. So it like, I kind of bought that she is speaking weird. I guess she has a weird cadence to her because of the things she's going through. So you kind of excuse that performance because she doesn't do that throughout the entire film. There's definitely a progression as it goes, right?
Right. To me, the movie was kind of like a tale of two Bennings, and like I liked Annette Bening in the beginning for sure. I mean, I really sympathized when the daughter disappeared, and I'm like, I should have seen it coming. I kind of knew what the movie was about, and I still didn't see it coming. I was like, damn it, this is exactly the right moment, and that kind of devastated me. Then her meltdown afterwards, that's not so bad. That's like an immediate grief thing. Then she's in a coma for a few weeks. She comes back out of it. And then she's like outside listening to music, kind of putting on a brave smile. I'm like, I think you probably still you'd probably still be in bed at this point. I don't think I would have gotten out of bed.
Well, you got a psychopath invading your dreams, so that kind of gets you out of bed, I think.
Yeah. It's just, if you had told me going into this movie that Robert Downey Jr. was going to give the more subdued performance, as a serial killer who invades people's dreams, I would not have believed you. Because Downey has a couple of moments where he's really big, but they're not believable, but at least they're supposed to be really big moments. But otherwise, I mean, I did really like all the dream stuff. I especially liked all the apple imagery.
How about them apples, huh?
And the flooded town imagery. All that was very good. And although Billy said, maybe this is us putting a postscript on it, I do see this as sort of a story about, whether it's intended or not, about believing women, and those women becoming more powerful, later on, and empowering themselves.
Ryan, what are you thinking?
Well, I watched this days ago and remember almost nothing in it. So as I was listening to this case, I was like, yeah, I guess that happened. Sure. Okay, whatever. So I'm going purely on the merits of the arguments given, and to the prosecution's point that Annette Bening is giving a bad performance, I don't agree with that whatsoever. I can really identify with her deteriorating mental state, because it's like being a bipolar teenager, which I once was. So I can completely get on her side. The movie looks amazing. Darius Kanji, one of our greatest living director of photography.
Oh my gosh.
He's so good.
Yeah. The movie, underwater scene, like the...
Oh, it looks amazing. It looks so good.
Yeah. That was great.
No, go ahead.
Not just that, but like the play and that they're doing in the woods, which would never happen, of course, but it still looks fantastic.
It's cinematic, man. It doesn't have to be real.
Yeah.
It's cinematic.
There's a reason we don't do it anymore, Ben. But
yeah, that's true. That one time Smokey the Bear came in, and he was pretty mad about it.
But yeah, I would give this a gentleman's 5, which means I'm right down the middle. So, you guys keep going, because I got nothing.
I guess we're out. I'm looking down my list. I like I like the fact that it takes chances. Yeah, I know. You broke the show, Billy Ray. I do like that it takes chances. I do like that it takes risks. I do agree with the defense on that point. There are a lot of interesting things happening. I was never ever bored in this movie at all. I was confused at a few points, but that mostly came down to the scripting, or maybe the director not agreeing with the script or things like that. So there were a few moments there that would definitely knock it down from being a perfect movie.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's making the argument that it's a perfect movie.
6. No.
Yeah.
But one that's worth being seen. I mean, I would put it in like the recommendations of justice category, where it's definitely something you haven't seen before, and there are things to study and get out of it. I would put it as a gentleman's 6 out of 10 myself.
I wouldn't dissuade anybody from watching it. That's for sure. Like if somebody said, I'm going to watch In Dreams, I'd be like, yeah, have fun. Enjoy it.
It's worth seeing just for Robert Downey Jr., just as a little nurse.
Right. So we want to lock in?
I'm the only one that had something awoken in me from that. All right. Okay.
No, I already had it from Heath Ledger in the Joker.
I also did
Batman,
want to give one other point that I did agree with the prosecution. I don't like that Robert Downey Jr. lives at the end. I get that she can kind of torture him in dreams. I just don't think that's equivalent to his incredibly heinous crimes. I would have rather he found some way to go to actual jail than where he was.
To be honest, though, I thought he was going to die. So the fact that he didn't, and then they subvert that with the way that he does actually end up serving time in a different way, I kind of found appealing. That whole Freddy Krueger reversal thing, because I was definitely getting Nightmare on Elm Street vibes throughout that whole.
Oh yeah, thing. I think that's there somewhere. So am I going on?
So who's locking in?
I guess I'll lock in first. So I have my issues with some of the things. Like I'm not as forgiving of Benning's performance. To me, that's like the biggest thing that stands out. Her craziness of those scenes is just, I understand she's frantic, but to me she's distractingly over the top. But I guess you can kind of chalk it up to her mental state. But I like her plenty of the other scenes, so I call that about a wash. I like seeing Robert Downey Jr. as a serial killer. That was pretty cool. And I mentioned all the visuals and stuff that I thought worked. Some of them metaphorically too. So I'm gonna go not guilty.
Mr. Rodriguez.
I agreed with some points of the prosecution. I think that the depiction of mental illness leaves a little to be desired. But at the same time, when I sat down and watched this movie, which again I don't remember, I could not have watched it. Who knows? Who can really say? But I really found myself gravitating towards pretty much everything the defense said, simply because Billy Ray is very well spoken, but also because the fact that somebody could approach this movie with this much kind of analytical thinking, I think speaks to the qualities of the film. So I'm going to go not guilty.
And yeah, I pretty much already gave my thoughts on it. Gentlemen, 6 out of 7. I agree. There's a lot to look at this film. Not great, but I would watch it again. I'd be interested in. I think you would get more on a second viewing too. I think that there's stuff there that now that you know where it's going with the character of Vivian, there's things to look for earlier on. So I think it has rewatchability. So also not guilty.
Gentlemen, 6 out of 7?
Judge.
That's not how this scale works.
6 out of 10. 6 out of 10. Sorry. Billy Ray broke my brain tonight. I don't know what's going on.
Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of the people versus In Dreams, we find in favor of the defendant.
Oh, I can feel the wash of emotions flooding me like a small town.
Boo!
The verdict is so rendered, and In Dreams is hereby released from movie jail. I would come up with a funny conclusion, but this movie is a fuck of a bummer. Court is adjourned.
Ah, it feels good. You know, I think this is the first time I've been on, and it was a unanimous not guilty.
It almost never happens, actually. Maybe I could count it on one hand times we're unanimous.
Well, I mean, and if it's gonna happen, it might as well happen within fucking Dreams.
This is Bruce Robinson. Apparently I'm a writer or something for this movie, and this impression is entirely based off of that other guy's impression. Reporting to you from outside the Reels of Justice. Now, Dylan J. Schlender, I heard that bad impression you did of me earlier. Get over here. What'd you think of the jury's verdict?
Hey, I thought the impression was pretty good.
Are you mocking me?
No, I can't say I'm surprised, and I really respect Billy's passion for this movie. It's just passion I could not muster. I mean, I honestly did not care for this movie, but it was just, there wasn't a lot to grab onto. It's just like, it was just kind of a blob of a movie, but everyone else likes it. That's fine. It's like Halloween 3. You got that wrong. You got Titan AE wrong. You guys get so much wrong, but it's okay. I love you anyway, and I'll see you next
If only we had an appeals process.
Well, I don't know why you're talking about the past, Big Ben Haslar. It's like you don't know how our release schedule works at all. So, Billy Ray, Brewton, get in here. What did you think of the jury's verdict? Probably more favorable than that last guy.
Oh, yeah. I thought the jury made the wise decision. I think, I think In Dreams is a film. History will be its true judge. I'll be interested to see, in another 25 years, because it hasn't I'm still waiting on it to get its official reclamation. And that hasn't happened yet. People are discovering it more and more. And I take some credit for that because I've been force feeding this down people's throats for a while now. So I'm waiting on the proper reclamation. And when that happens, I'll be very happy. And you know who else will probably be happy? Bruce Robinson, because it'll mean more money.
That's me. I am Bruce Robinson. I did cash that check, but I was also happy to see the movie sit on the shelf for a couple of days.
Bruce, I do have to ask you, because, I mean, seeing that you were born and raised in England and have lived there all your life, hence the
I'm
fact
from the rough
that
part of England.
Yeah, I'm
river.
just curious. Where did that accent come from? Because on the press tour for Jennifer 8, I feel like it was a little decidedly more British countryside.
Well, sometimes you got to put on those affectations for those big tours for the tourists, But I can just kick back and be myself.
You sound more like Edward G. Robinson.
I can't do an impression of him either. So, anyway,
Arrow!
thank you, Billy Ray. Would you like some beef jerky? I'm making myself.
I would
Here,
love.
I got some in my pocket. I'm sorry, it's not in bags. All right, so we're gonna go back to post-trial analysis, and that's all we got here. British, eh? All right. Well, thank you.
Dang, could have done
Schlender.
Please, we had someone do
Pointed
some
out that he
research,
was the
Dylan.
director of With Nail and I, and you didn't know that he was
Could have
British.
done our-
Oh my god!
James Mason impression again. Dust that one off.
Oh yeah, you could have just done James Mason again. A lot of fun. So Billy Ray, what's been keeping you busy? What have you been up to lately?
Oh, heavens. Well, I host a couple of podcasts. I host The Incinerator, which you gentlemen are familiar with, seeing as how you were on this season.
All the important members of this podcast were
And I
on.
heard people hated it.
Oh boy, we got more hate mail for that episode than any episode we've ever gotten, and
I'm really proud of that.
All the hate mail was centered around one very particular decision, and that was the Spider-Man,
Yeah,
Spider-Man
yeah.
2 decision.
It was mine. I was the one that did it. You know, I was going in. I didn't mean to like have that sort of reaction. I thought it might be sort of clever and subversive. Like, hey, look at Marvel, how they're sort of, you know, ruining themselves by losing the script in this way. But yeah, sorry, sorry, I got that reaction for your show because I really loved being on.
No, that I didn't say it was a bad reaction, because let's be clear. Anybody who is getting that intense about Marvel at a period where they're churning out the shit they're churning out, they don't get a lot of like positive reinforcement coming from me. But that is one podcast I host, The Incinerator. We're in the middle of season 2. I host that with my buddy Ryan Verrill. We've got 5 episodes, I think, already up for season 2, and got plenty more on the way. And then I also host a new political podcast called Center Clueless that I host with my friend Eric Serwell. And it's kind of, we're just a couple of schlubs trying to figure out why everything is so fucking awful.
Good luck.
with that.
Around
If you
episode
figure it out,
100,
let us
you'll
know.
finally
Yeah.
stick upon it.
Is
It's
it-
a lifelong endeavor.
Is it just like being relatively conservative Democrats, or is it like a libertarian?
No, I mean, it's certainly not a libertarian, because if I haven't been clear in previous podcasts I've been on before, fuck libertarians. But no, it's I mean,
There goes our viewer base.
we both identify as I would say Democrats primarily, but I am certainly more towards the center than I am. You know, I'm certainly not far left, right? If I might be slightly left of center, and so I find that as I get older, I just, not necessarily that the tenets of my politics change, but the way that I work within political constructs changes. And so it's just gotten me thinking differently about politics. And also everything in the world is just fucking awful right now. So it's like everything is so polarized too. It's like it's got to be far right or it's got to be far left. There's no like agreement in the center. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, is say, you know what? No, everything's better in the center. It's nicer in the center. We get along better in the center.
Trying to pull that Overton window back. I like it.
That's right.
I've listened to the first 3 episodes though, and I am liking it so far.
Thank you.
so,
You. Yeah, we just dropped
And
episode
Ben's a staunch
4.
communist, so if you can
Yeah.
get him.
It's hard to win me over. We're gonna cut that, right?
No, I'm keeping it because it's a joke. But you can continue, Billy Ray.
No, I mean, that's kind of it. You know, that's pretty much what I'm working on right now. I've got some other irons in the fire, but not a lot I can really talk about. But those 2 things I'm working my butt off on. So support us.
And maybe continued episodes of Brooks is Here,
Oh yes, well that's for the Patreon.
which everyone should sign up for.
Yes, everyone should. Patreon.com/IncineratorPod. We do lots of fun little series over there. We do our Burn Baby Burn series with Mitchell Beaupre, where we talk about every film from 1992. We do Brooks is Here, which is our disintegration of the oeuvre of Mel Brooks. The newest episode is going to drop next week, so that will be the next episode of that. And then also we do... we have a series that's going to be dropping in the next couple of weeks called Because of John Hughes. The first episode of that, where we interview with folks who work with John and kind of get a holistic picture of the man, the myth, the legend.
John Hughes, yes, whose work I'm very familiar with, so we don't even have to go into. So, Billy, we always ask for recommendations from our guests for movies that you think people should see. So, what is a movie that you think people should see?
So, remind me in real time, am I recommending films connected to the film we just discussed, or just films in general?
Just any.
You
film
can recommend
in general.
whatever movie you want. Whatever you
We
think someone should
sometimes
see.
try to connect it just because we run out of ideas, but you don't have to.
I don't.
Right.
Okay. Then wonderful. Then I'll recommend a couple films that have no relation whatsoever to this film. The first film is a film called The Eight Mountains, which is my favorite film of 2023, one of the best films I have ever seen. It is on the festival circuit right now. I think it's in limited release also. It's from the team Felix van Groningen and Charlotte van der Merch, who did Broken Circle Breakdown a few years ago, which was also an incredible film. It's about two friends. It follows them over the course of about 30 years. And it is a platonic male friendship, an intimate male friendship. There's no romance whatsoever. And that is something that we just don't get to see told very well in films these days. And I think it's really beautifully made and just stunningly gorgeous. It takes place in the Italian Alps, and it's just terrific. So hopefully everybody will check that out. Couldn't be more tonally different from In Dreams. And
sounds good.
And then the only other film I mentioned, which is related to In Dreams, it would be, if you haven't seen it, Eric Red's Body Parts from 1991, starring Jeff Fahey. It's about a man who becomes possessed by the soul of a serial killer whose arm he received in a transplant. And it's Jeff Fahey, Brad Dourif. It's just a fantastic film. Again, Eric Red directed that. Shout Factory put out a really cool release of it, I believe, or was it?
It was Shout Factory.
You know, Lord,
it was.
Yeah, put out a really cool release a couple years ago. It's a really, really underrated horror film, and definitely shares some DNA with In Dreams.
And makes for one of the best Treehouse of Horror segments, where Homer gets Snake's toupee that then takes over his body.
That is correct.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Hell toupee, hell toupee.
The getting the body part that kind of gives you traits is, that's a trope from even back to like noir films. I think there's Hands of a Stranger from the 60s where he gets hands grafted on from a murderer that he then tries to strangle people with. I'm sure that's not even the first. But it's always good to have new ones, right? So.
Oh yeah, and Body Parts. I'm glad it started getting rediscovered in the last few years, because it's really, Jeff Fahey's given a really cool performance here, and I think they handled the concept and the conceit really well.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. Schlenzo, what is your recommendation?
Well, tonight I'm going to recommend a movie starring Anthony Quinn where he plays a Greek, and it's punctuated with a famous dance scene. Yes, I'm talking about The Greek Tycoon from 1978, directed by our favorite director, J. Lee Thompson. This film is a thinly veiled chronicle of the real-life events behind Jacqueline Kennedy's courtship and subsequent marriage to Aristotle Onassis.
Awesome.
And what is really... What's that?
Awesome name.
Aristotle
Onassis.
It's his full name is Aristotle Socrates Onassis. Very Greek. But anyway, what is really enjoyable about this movie is its sense of place and time. When it was released, a lot of critics thought it was borderline garish, but now, with so many years removed, we could see it as a piece of almost but not quite history and a form of stylistic voyeurism that is not so unpalatable to our modern sensibilities. The core strength of the film is Quinn's performance. He plays the Greek billionaire with such conviction and yet loses none of the human elements you need to relate to him as a man. File this one under should be on Tubi. Alas, it's not streaming anywhere I can find, so get creative and savor one of Thompson's finest features.
That's right. He's so Greek, he should be served with tzatziki.
I can co-sign on that one. I have seen The Greek Tycoon, and I love it for all the reasons I love something like Caligula.
Oh yeah. Well,
the ambition is staggering.
Yeah, no,
that's a better tagline for the poster though. Billy Ray's.
Yeah, let's use Billy Ray's. But
it is ambitious. It's incredibly well produced. I mean, most of it's on like a yacht. There's Greek islands, incredible locations, and everyone's dressed to the nines. You know, because it's basically dealing with super rich people 24/7.
Nice. Let's see. Big
Mr.
Bun.
Rodriguez.
Oh, let's let Mr. Rodriguez. You're right. He was the judge. I always forget.
Here come the judge.
Mr. Rodriguez, what is your recommendation?
My recommendation, like always, has nothing to do with this week's case, and you could look at it as a kind of endurance test. From 1975, it's Chantal Akerman's masterpiece, and I'm going to butcher the title here because I'm not from France, but here goes. Jean Dielman 23 Croix de Commun, 1080 Brussels. The film is about the
Nailed it.
titular middle-aged widow as she goes about her daily routine over the course of 3 days. She cooks meals, she sits in silence, she polishes shoes, she sits in silence, etc. Ackerman frames these scenes with a locked-off static camera and just lets life unfold. At 201 minutes, it may be the most boring thing I've ever seen, but as Will Sloan pointed out in his review, there are different kinds of boredom, and Jean Dielman is of the transcendent kind, portraying a trapped woman cursed to live the same claustrophobic day over and over again in a kind of time loop. It was recently crowned the greatest movie ever by Sight and Sound, so suck on that, Vertigo. Jean Dielman is currently streaming on the Criterion Channel.
Nice. 201 minutes of sitting and polishing. I like it. That was your recommendation, right?
I know.
Big
An
Bun,
endurance test.
Yeah.
I'm going to make my audition tape for Incinerator's J-Horror episode and dip once again into that well that blesses me so much and recommend a film that I think might be In Dreams meets The Shining meets The Grudge, and say you should check out Takashi Shimizu's Reincarnation.
Yeah.
The story is an original one, as near as I can tell. It's like a crime thriller movie combined with ghost horror. The story is that years ago in a hotel, one man murdered all the guests and staff except for one. Fast forward to the present day, and the film crew is trying to shoot a movie about it. The catch is that some of the people involved in the film's production are the reincarnated forms of the people involved in the case, including the killer. These characters begin seeing things like dead forms and victims of past memories, and the past starts merging with the present. And I personally think it would be ripe for a Hollywood remake, especially with true crime being the new hotness. Reincarnation is rentable on Amazon, Google Play, and YouTube, so tech giants only for this one.
I saw that back in high school because it was part of the first series of 8 films to die for.
Yeah, yes, it was.
Yeah.
I think that's how anyone saw it in the United States, unless
Yeah.
they were specifically hunting it out.
And that was one of the ones that I remember standing out to me for quite a bit out of that set. All right, so my recommendation this week is also unrelated to today's film, a non sequitur recommendation, a non sequamendation. You might say, trying it out. And it's 2023's historical action film Sisu, directed by Jalmari Helander and starring, Jorma Tomila and
Jorma.
It's me, Jorma Tamila. How can you not get my name right?
It tells the story of a Finnish soldier turned prospector who must prevent his recently unearthed boon from falling into the hands of a brutal band of Nazi soldiers in World War II era Lapland. If you like a lot of realism in your film, look elsewhere, because this movie prefers its violence stylish and outlandish. But that doesn't mean it throws historical accuracy out the window. I was impressed by the clothing, weapons, and vehicles that appeared, at least to the layman, to be authentic to the era. It's me, I'm the layman. But mostly this movie is about a stone-cold badass wasting a whole bunch of fucking Nazis with impunity, and what more can we ask for? And Schlenzo, earlier you mentioned dancing, right? You know,
I did, yes.
You know what kind of dance they do in Lapland?
What do they do?
Right? You know the traditional dance of Lapland?
Oh, boo. This is a family show.
That's right. It's the Finnish tango. So make sure to tango check out Sisu, currently available for rent or purchase. It's Nazi-killing goodness from start to finish.
Oh,
Well,
Why
there you
would
go,
people
Billy. We
go
did
out to
have
see
new
a movie
puns.
that's not in theaters?
let me. Oh,
But Tango check out. Like you go and look at your streaming service, Ryan. Go is a very
it
big
is still
thing.
in theaters though. It's playing here in Seattle.
Oh, you should maybe see it in theaters. That would be.
Oh no, I've already.
Russian
No,
episode.
I've already seen Sisu. I saw this opening weekend, so I'm a big
yeah.
fan of this film. I loved his film Rare Exports: A Christmas Tale, also from 2010, which is like my favorite fucked up Santa Claus
That one
movie.
is fun.
And yeah, this one's just a blast from start to finish. It's got kind of like it's got the choreographed like mayhem of like a John Wick, but in a much more like I don't know. It just feels more brutal. It feels more brutal.
Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. And with that, we are all out of show. But we want to thank our guest Billy Ray Brewton for joining us. Thank you very much, Billy Ray.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm always delighted to be on here and introduce people to films that they'll hate me for.
Well,
maybe.
good. You'll be on next week.
See you next week where we'll be debating Titanic.
Nice.
Dude, I love Titanic. I'm sorry.
That guy hits the propeller. I mean, come on.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and Billy Zane's so good. But
Stuck
we'll
the
have you
landing.
back as well, and we hope everyone else will join us too, as the reels of justice keep turning.
Count it.
Apples.
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.